Chapter 5. Warren Bishop's heart pounded in his chest as he raced through the narrow streets of Lisdoonvarna, his feet barely touching the cobblestones. The quaint Irish town, which had seemed so charming just days ago, now felt like a maze of obstacles between him and his missing wife. Every second counted. Every moment that passed was another moment Thelma might be in danger. As he rounded a corner, the squat, grey building of the Garda station came into view. Warren's pace quickened, hope and desperation warring within him. Surely the local authorities would help, would understand the urgency of the situation. They had to. Warren burst through the doors of the station, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The interior was dimly lit, a far cry from the bustling hive of activity he had expected. A few officers meandered about, their movements slow and purposeless, as if time held no meaning within these walls. For a moment, Warren stood frozen, his eyes darting from one uniformed figure to another. Where was the sense of urgency? Where was the determination to serve and protect? The air hung heavy with the scent of stale coffee and indifference. Shaking off his momentary paralysis, Warren approached the front desk. A portly officer sat there, his attention focused on a newspaper spread before him. Warren cleared his throat, trying to catch the man's eye. "Excuse me," Warren began, his voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "I need help. My wife." The officer held up a hand, not bothering to look up from his paper. "Take a number and have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Warren blinked, confusion and frustration warring within him. "But this is an emergency. My wife has been kidnapped." At this, the officer finally deigned to meet Warren's gaze. His eyes, a watery blue, held no spark of concern or interest. "Kidnapped, you say? And when did this happen?" "Last night," Warren replied, leaning forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "We were attacked in the parking lot of our bed and breakfast. They took her, knocked me unconscious. Please, we have to act quickly." The officer sighed, a sound of profound boredom. "Right then, you'll want to speak with Detective O'Brien. He handles all our exotic cases." The way he said exotic made it clear he didn't believe a word Warren was saying. As the officer pointed to a desk across the room, Warren felt a surge of anger. In his mind, he dubbed the unhelpful man Officer Buttface, a childish act of defiance against the bureaucracy that stood between him and finding Thelma. Warren made his way to the indicated desk, where another officer sat, this one younger, but with the same air of disinterest as his colleague. "Officer Buttface too," Warren thought uncharitably. "Detective O'Brien?" Warren asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance at being interrupted. "That's me. What can I do for you?" Warren launched into his story, the words tumbling out in a rush. He described the attack, the men who had taken Thelma, the van they had used. With each detail, his voice grew more urgent, his gestures more animated. O'Brien listened, his face a mask of skepticism. When Warren finished, the detective leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "That's quite a tale, Mr. Bishop, Warren Bishop," Warren supplied, hope flickering in his chest. Perhaps now they would take action. "Mr. Bishop," O'Brien continued, "you understand that we get a lot of unusual stories from tourists. Are you sure your wife hasn't simply gone off on her own, perhaps to do some sightseeing?" Warren's hope crumbled, replaced by a surge of anger. "Sightseeing? Did you not hear a word I said? She was taken forcibly, by armed men. This isn't some misunderstanding or wild goose chase." O'Brien held up his hands in a placating gesture. Now, Mr. Bishop, there's no need for shouting. Why don't you start from the beginning? And this time, try to stick to the facts." Warren took a deep breath, forcing himself to speak slowly and clearly. He recounted the events of the previous night once more, emphasizing the violence of the attack and the very real danger Thelma was in. As he spoke, another officer passed by, pausing to exchange a few words with O'Brien. Warren caught snippets of their conversation, his blood boiling as he realized they were making jokes at his expense. "Another yank with a tall tale," the passing officer chuckled. "What is it this time? Leprechauns make off with his pot of gold." O'Brien smirked, shaking his head. "Kidnapping, if you can believe it. Probably had a row with the missus and she stormed off." Warren's hands clenched into fists, his nails digging into his palms. He mentally dubbed the newcomer Officer Buttface 3, adding him to the growing list of unhelpful authority figures. As the third officer walked away, still chuckling, O'Brien turned his attention back to Warren. "Now then, Mr. Bishop, let's go through this one more time. You say you were attacked in a parking lot. Did anyone else witness this alleged assault?" Warren's frustration mounted with each passing second. "I don't know. It was late. The lot was empty. But there must be evidence. Tire tracks, something." O'Brien sighed, reaching for a form from his desk drawer. "Well, we can file a missing persons report. But I must warn you, without any concrete evidence or witnesses, there's not much we can do." Warren stared at the form, his vision blurring with unshed tears of anger and desperation. "A missing persons report? My wife has been kidnapped. Every moment we waste here is a moment she could be." He couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. O'Brien's expression remained impassive. "I understand you're upset, Mr. Bishop, but we have procedures we must follow. Now, if you'll just fill out this form." Warren's control snapped. He slammed his fist on the desk, sending papers flying. "Forget your procedures. A woman's life is at stake. My wife's life. How can you sit there and do nothing?" The station fell silent, all eyes turning to Warren. He stood there, chest heaving, aware of the spectacle he was making, but past the point of caring. From an office at the back of the station, a door opened. A stern-faced man emerged, his uniform indicating a higher rank than the others. "What in God's name is going on out here?" he demanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Warren turned to face the newcomer, recognizing him as his last hope for help. "Sir, please, I've been trying to report a kidnapping. My wife Thelma, she was taken last night. These men," he gestured to O'Brien and the others, "they won't listen, won't do anything to help." The man, who Warren assumed must be the sergeant in charge, approached slowly. His eyes, sharp and assessing, moved from Warren to O'Brien and back again. "Is this true, officer? We have a reported kidnapping?" O'Brien shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Well, sir, Mr. Bishop here has quite a story, but there's no evidence, no witnesses. It seems more likely that his wife has simply—" "She didn't leave me," Warren interjected, his voice cracking with emotion. "She was taken, by force. Why won't anyone believe me?" The sergeant held up a hand, silencing both Warren and O'Brien. "Mr. Bishop, was it? I'm Sergeant Murphy. Now, why don't you tell me exactly what happened from the beginning?" For a moment, hope flared in Warren's chest. Finally, someone who would listen, who would take action. He launched into his story once more, watching Murphy's face carefully for any sign of belief or concern. But as he spoke, Warren saw the same skepticism, the same dismissive attitude he had encountered with the others, creep into Murphy's expression. By the time he finished his account, Warren knew with a sinking heart that he would find no help here. Murphy exchanged a glance with O'Brien, a look that spoke volumes. When he turned back to Warren, his voice was patronizing, almost pitying. "Mr. Bishop, I understand you're upset. Honeymoons don't always go as planned. Sometimes couples have disagreements, and one party might need some time alone." Warren stared at Murphy in disbelief. In his mind, he added a final name to his list, Officer Butt-Face 4. "You think this is some kind of lover's quarrel? That Thelma just walked away in the middle of the night? Did you not hear me describe the men who attacked us, the van they used?" Murphy sighed, shaking his head. "What I hear, Mr. Bishop, is a man who's had a bit too much to drink, perhaps, and has conjured up a wild story to explain his wife's absence. Now, why don't you go back to your lodgings, get some rest, and I'm sure your wife will turn up soon enough." Warren's last shred of hope evaporated. He looked from Murphy to O'Brien, to the other officers who had gathered to watch the spectacle. Not one face showed genuine concern or a willingness to help. With a final, disgusted shake of his head, Warren turned on his heel and stormed towards the exit. Behind him, he heard O'Brien call out, "Mr. Bishop, wait! You need to file a proper report." But Warren was done. Done with their bureaucracy, their skepticism, their utter lack of humanity. As he pushed through the doors of the station, back into the cool Irish air, he knew with grim certainty that if Thelma was to be saved, it would be up to him alone. Standing on the street corner, Warren took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The encounter with the Garda had left him shaken, angry, and more desperate than ever. His whole body still ached, but trudged on. He couldn't rely on the authorities for help. That much was painfully clear. But what could he do on his own, in a foreign country, with no resources and no leads? As he stood there, the quite low-key sounds of Lisdoonvarna's main street continued around him. A tourist or two wandered by with maps in hand. A local hurried to work. The normalcy of it all seemed obscene in light of Thelma's absence. Warren ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and helplessness. He needed a plan, needed help, needed something. Anything that might lead him to Thelma. As he turned to walk away from the station, a snippet of conversation he had overheard at the bed and breakfast suddenly surfaced in his memory. Two elderly gentlemen had been talking over breakfast, discussing a local character. "That Liam Fitzpatrick," one had said, shaking his head in admiration. "If there's a mystery to be solved in County Clare, he's the man to do it." "Aye," his companion had agreed. "They say he can find a needle in a haystack, that one. A regular Sherlock Holmes, our Liam." At the time, Warren had paid little attention to the conversation, too wrapped up in planning the day's activities with Thelma. Now, however, the name Liam Fitzpatrick seemed like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man, a private investigator. Someone who might actually listen to his story, who might have the skills and resources to help find Thelma. It wasn't much, but it was more than he had 5 minutes ago. Slowly, Warren shuffled down the street. He had no idea where to find this Liam Fitzpatrick, but in a town the size of Lisdoonvarna, how hard could it be? As he walked, Warren's mind raced with possibilities. What if this Fitzpatrick turned out to be another dead end? What if he refused to help? What if he was too late already, and Thelma was... No. Warren pushed the thought away violently. He couldn't afford to think like that. Thelma was alive, and he would find her. He had to. The streets of Lisdoonvarna seemed to mock him with their quaintness, their utter normality. How could life go on as usual when his entire world had been turned upside down? Every passing face became a potential kidnapper, every van a possible getaway vehicle. Warren's pace quickened, limping along, his eyes scanning shop fronts and street signs for any indication of a private investigator's office. He had to find Liam Fitzpatrick. He had to find Thelma, and God help anyone who stood in his way.